Welcome, everybody, to the Mind, Body, and Soul TV show coming to you live from our Denver Internet TV studios. I'm your host, Coach Steve Toth, and also the founder of Conscious Evolution Media, going on 10 plus years, 15,000 plus shows, and I stopped counting because it just doesn't make sense anymore. We have a wonderful guest with us this evening. Her name is Susan Heckeman, and she is a hand analyst. And we'll find out lots about her and what she does in the next Conscious Hour. And our theme for this evening is how to discover and cultivate your life purpose. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm thrilled to be here too. And so if I take away, Susan, the title hand analyst, and all the other titles, like I know that you're married, and so you're a wife, a mother, and a friend, a colleague, and any other titles has anybody given you in your life. If I took them all away, what's left? Who is really Susan Heckeman?
I would say that I am a soul who is living in a physical body on Earth, trying to develop the unique soul qualities that I was born with, trying to discover them and develop them, and then through my physical body and through my relationships and the work that I do, to use those gifts and attributes and qualities to support other people to find their soul purpose so they can kind of do the same process.
Wonderful. So in terms of your own experience, let's get related to the viewers a little bit. Just Give us the short version of your story to this point.
Okay, the short version is in my mid-40s, I hit a wall. I couldn't get through. And I remember those times were so difficult because I was trying to do it all perfectly, be the good wife, the good mother, the good member of my faith community.
The superwoman?
The superwoman. And
wow.
I couldn't understand what was wrong. And really what I was looking for was authenticity and purpose. And so, it was over a series of years. It took me a while to find hand analysis, and I was trying to figure things out and just questioning everything that I accidentally found hand analysis. And it intrigued me. And what really intrigued me was the fact that besides looking at your hand, which is your personality, you look at your fingerprint patterns, and that in those fingerprint patterns reside your soul essence. So I'm actually a bit
of where did this come from, by the way? Like who discovered this or who created this?
A gentleman named Richard Unger. And it's really kind of a fascinating story. When he was a youth, still in college, he found a book called, it's something Scientific Hand Analysis by a gentleman called William Benham. And he got it as a joke. And so he started reading people's hands, and he was very surprised at how accurate it was. But after about 10 years and reading, like he said, over 12,000 pairs of hands, he noticed that people with similar markings on the hands would act very differently. So he thought either your hands are not an accurate reflection of your personality, or there was another layer of information. Since he had already read everything he could on palmistry in English, he began to look into medical libraries, because there's a lot of medical aspects between fingerprints and certain diseases and mental diseases. And that's where he came across the idea of your fingerprints being like a topographical map. And honestly, he said he had an intuitive download. He didn't have to work out the system. He said he remembered the system. So he went and he began to test it to see if there was anything valid to it. And then he began to test other people to use the same system. And now, there's many hundreds of hand analysts all over the world. And so we use a system of looking at what's in your fingerprints as well as what's in your hands to help a person really understand and then begin to cultivate their life purpose.
And why is it that way? That whatever the lines and things that are in our hands and also in our fingerprints, why is it that way? What's the connection to
Well,
life purpose?
for the hands, your hands and your brain and your brain and your hands talk more than any other part of your body. As much as your sensory organs, your eyes, your lips. I don't have it with me. I wish I would have printed it, but I have a picture of what a human being would look like between their brain and that part of their body talking to each other. Your arms, your body could not hold up your hands. I mean, you would just, there's a lot of talking back and forth. So that explains the hands. The fingerprints is a little bit more of a mystery, and I'm actually going to share, it's a quote from the Navajo tribe. And it says that the Great Spirit breathes in the breath of life, and the tracks of that breath become your fingerprints. So it's a really beautiful quote. And also the fact is, you know, your fingerprints look like energy patterns. There are four main fingerprint types. You know, there's the whorl, the kind of that spiral shape. There's, you know, that wave. There's like a little blip like that, like, you know, like when water's kind of choppy. And then, of course, you have that very gentle horizontal line. And those are energy patterns that you can see. I mean, you can look all over nature and they're everywhere. So what are energy patterns doing on the tips of your fingers?
Wow.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
This is this is quite fascinating because, I mean, we all know that the police department and now other governments using fingerprints to identify people, and there is no two out of
No,
the
they're not.
7 billion out of the 7 billion of us. That's quite fascinating how that works.
Right. And what's very interesting is your fingerprints form between 14 and 16 weeks of gestation. And of course, you know, they never change. And not even identical twins have the same type of fingerprints. They have, sometimes they're similar, but on some identical twins are actually quite different. So, what,
And you know this because you have twins, right?
well, yeah, but I have boy-girl twins, so they're not identical. But
okay.
They've done other twin studies with identical twins, and their fingerprints are not the same. They're different.
Wow.
Yeah. So we
Well,
say, so we say not only do your fingerprints, you know, physically identify you, and I've looked at plenty, and they really are unique, but they also identify you on a soul essence level as well.
okay. So, so really, I'm just now seeing this as a tool, as another tool. I mean, there's a lot of tools that we have discovered here, you know, on the network, and people keep watching these shows. So I see this as a tool to assist people, because a lot of times when I ask people, and especially at the beginning of the creation of this network, my favorite questions used to be not the question I asked you, which is, what if I take away your titles, who you are? But I have asked them these questions: who are you? What do you want? How are you going to get what you want? And when you're going to get what you want? Like, why are you here? And people couldn't answer these questions. So I had to change them because we can't have silence on the show.
Well, those are very deep questions, you know, that you just asked. As far as who am I, you know, purpose really, it's not like a two-dimensional thing. And I like to explain to my clients and also for myself, it's more like a multifaceted jewel. But in that jewel, I think there's like there's a lot of threes, you notice, but there's like three major, like big categories. And one of that is our purpose and connection to, you know, the divine, you know, God. People have different names for it. It doesn't matter. That's a very personal journey, but it's our purpose in relationship to something more than who we are. And then we have understanding our purpose in relationship to ourselves. You know, what are we made of? What are the potential attributes that I was born with that I need to develop? You know, who am I? You know, just exploring, you know, all that good stuff that every single soul is born with. And then it's, okay, how do I take my skills, my attributes, my interests, and then bring it out into the world, into relationships, into work, into hobbies, so that those are the three like very general areas of purpose. And it's not, there's not Hallmark platitudes and it's not cutesy sayings. It's deep, and I believe it's soul work, and it's called life purpose for a reason. It takes a while. It takes our whole life.
Yeah. So I'm finding that a lot of people, in their journey, and I guess this is not true for everyone, of course, it never is, but for most people, they don't know what their life purpose is, nor are they looking for it for a long time. They're just living life, having fun, doing what you were talking about at the beginning of the show, like people partying in their 20s and then in their 30s. They think about getting married and then have kids and then get married, get divorced. And then we think that we're so different, and I'm finding doing all these shows that we're not that different.
No, I
mean,
agree. We're
I
more
mean,
alike than different.
yeah, we have a lot of similarities as humans,
Mm-hmm.
the journeys that we go through, and we kind of all end up in the same place. Like we all end up in being awake and being conscious, and then we get on that journey. So I'm interested in you explaining a little more to the viewers about
Mm-hmm.
the dark night of the soul. It's a good
Okay.
place to begin this journey.
Well, for me, and I can only say this, I'm going to say in the last few years, that now I can look at it really as an invitation. I think I had lost touch with who I was. And I think this was spirit, God, whatever you want to calling it, like shaking me and say, Susan, wake up. You need to live your life. And although it was excruciatingly painful and difficult, and you'll hear this same thing from many people,
Yeah.
it was one of
No,
the best
we
things that
heard
ever
this many
happened to
times.
me, many
Yeah.
times. But it takes a while. Believe me, even 5-6 years ago, I may not have said that. It was like, seriously? But now I can look back and say it because it was my invitation to live authentically, to honestly create a better marriage, to be a better parent, to find hand analysis, which I love, and really set the stage for the second half of my life, not to be like the first half of my life. There was a lot of challenges in the first half of my life. It's a typical, crazy family situation. And to really finally put my feet on the ground and flourish, not just make it through the day.
But how people would know that they're experiencing the dark night of the soul? How would they know that?
Oh, goodness. How would you know that? You're hurting. You hurt. And, or you're lost, or you're stuck in the same repetitive cycle of things going wrong, even when you're trying not to make different choices. And boom, almost like the same thing is happening. It might have a little bit of a different face, but it's underneath the same issues, that same energetic pattern that keeps happening. If you're not excited about being alive, midlife crisis is a great example. If you feel like, the rug's been pulled out from under you and you can't quite get your feet back on the ground, just if you feel like you're coasting and not living, I think those are very good ways of knowing that, you need to get things into better focus.
Gotcha. So there's something that I saw on your website that really spoke to me, and I may not be able to, forgive me, I may not be able to quote it exactly word for word, but you began this sentence that said, life is not to be lived as a continuous problems to be solved, but life is a mystery.
Yes.
to be lived. And that really spoke to me because so many of us are going through every day of our lives where
Mm-hmm.
all we're doing is problem solving, especially men. We men have a tendency just to fix everything. Everything is a problem and we can fix it.
And you fix it. Actually, right. That was a quote from, so I think I put the quote, the author of the quote.
Mm,
There's a book called, oh, and I just blanked out on the name of the book. But it's a wonderful book I read in the morning in meditation. And it was a quote is, what would life be like to live it as a mystery instead of a series of problems to be solved?
mm,
And honestly, when I was like going through my dark time, that quote shook me.
mm.
That quote shook me and really was a catalyst for me. And it's almost looking at life as a gift, and that every challenge that we have has the potential to help us grow.
So there's a purpose behind everything that's happening.
There's a purpose, even if we cause the problem our own selves.
Regardless of
Regardless.
what it
Yes.
is.
Hmm.
And
Right.
that there is something regardless of how negative the experience is, there is something positive that's going to come out of it
If you allow it. Yes, you have
if
to
you allow
allow
it.
it. If you
Or
allow it.
if you don't allow it, you just get to relive it over and over again.
If you don't, you get to relive it over and over
uh,
again, and then you get bitter, and then that's a real big red flag that, it's time to do something else. But, this is something that every person has to come to on their own.
what does being resigned and cynical mean to you?
Oh, cynical means almost having a self-negating, everything. You look at problems and it's almost like, see, everybody's icky, everybody's bad. And when you don't allow yourself to see the other side of it, because the truth is, we're at a time, there's a lot of bad things going on, but there's also a lot of good things going on. There's also a lot of positive things going on. And because I'm going to be honest, you have to dig for the positive things. You have to
Look
really,
at look at you.
you have to dig.
You're a positive thing going on.
I try, I try, I try, but you have to dig around for it. You
uh,
have to dig around for it. You have to really be focused that I'm not going to just, wallow in the negativity. For example, I really limit my exposure to media. I
yeah,
really
so am
limit
I.
it
Yeah, so am I.
because it's overwhelming if I don't.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like a smorgasbord. It's almost like a buffet that has been created by. Well, I never used those words before, but it's like a buffet for the majority of humanity that are really not awake and not conscious. They're just media has figured out this wonderful buffet of killings and negativity and bad things happening all over the world, and you can plug into that and feed off of it for as
Yes,
long
you
as you like.
can. You can.
24/7. They provide it 24/7.
Absolutely. It's very fear-based. And I don't want to live my life in a fear-based manner. I want to live my life trusting in, creator. I want to trusting in myself and knowing that I can grow. And that's how I want to live my life.
So I'm very sensitive, like you are.
Hmm.
So I train myself that if I'm feeling, I do a lot of my day-to-day living based on how I feel.
Hmm.
So if I feel that there is confusion, there is deception, there is manipulation, there's fear, there's force, those are my red flags.
Hmm.
That those are the things that I need to walk away from.
Yeah. And just as much as you can, because I'm very empathic as well. I can't watch violent movies. I'm a wreck.
I can't watch horror movies, Susan. I can't make myself do it.
I can't either. I don't like violent movies because like when somebody punches, I go like that. I'm telling you, I feel it. If you had fallen and broken your arm or something and you say, "Oh, I'm telling me about it," I get tingles in my arms and in my body. I can't do it. So, it's just being aware of that's knowing yourself and knowing who you are. And then, helping to shield yourself so you just don't get inundated with stuff that doesn't help you grow and doesn't help you flourish.
Yeah. Do you find when people are really understand who they are and have clarity about their purpose, that they can use that as a screen, like as a screener,
Mhm.
um, for all the other things that are coming in, because things are coming in from all over the world. That they can use it as a screen, what they want to say yes to and what they want to say no to.
Yeah, when you understand your purpose and who you are, and I think why hands are so helpful, both the information in your fingerprints and your hands, is it's kind of a thing of this is who I am, this is what helps me grow, this is what doesn't help me grow. And it's almost like being a wise gardener to your spirit. You know, I love to garden. I love to work outside. So we just moved to a new house. So I'm planting roses and other things. So I make sure my roses, where I put my roses to thrive, I put them where they're going to get a lot of sun. Because if I put them in the shade, they won't do well. It's because I know what I'm planting. I know what I'm doing. If I'm going to plant a hosta or a different type of plant, I'm going to put it someplace else. So it's that kind of knowledge that we have about us, that I know, that these are, this is my skill set. These are, this way of being makes me feel good. I flourish. I know that these type of things I need to get more skilled about, and this type of thing really shuts me down. Then how much, and I'm going to use the term power, it gives you the power and the knowledge to make wise choices that are soul and heart and mind affirming. And it isn't that you never make a mistake or you never get blindsided, because that's not what purpose is about. But it just helps you make wise decisions.
Got it. All right. So I want to make sure that we also clarify and make a distinction between palm readers, like what you can find when you're driving around on the street, and it
Uh-huh.
says, uh, you know, we can tell you your future, blah blah blah. You know
Hmm.
what I'm talking about?
Sure.
Between
Yes, I
that
do.
and what you do.
Well, that's one of my favorite questions. Well, first of all,
Okay.
hand analysis is non-predictive. I make no predictions about your hands. For example, your hands do not tell you how long you're going to live. Your hands do not tell you, how many marriages or committed relationships you're going to be in, or how many children you may or may not have, or if you're going to become rich. It doesn't tell you anything like that. Okay?
Or
What
the
I,
lottery numbers either.
or the lottery numbers, anything like that. Um, Everything I look at in the hands is what I look at it in relationship to what's going in your life right now. The second thing is hand analysis is scientific, because a particular marking means a particular thing on anybody's hands who shows up on, it's not just for you. So if I tell if I'm explaining something to a client and they say, where on the hand is it? I can show them exactly on the hand. And it means that on any hand I look at. Now, markings do have relationships to each other, but it's repeatable.
Okay.
And the third thing is palmistry looks, at your hands, your fingers, your lines, even the color of your hands, your thumbs, things like that. I look at that, but I also look at your fingerprint patterns. So it's like the fingerprint patterns we actually call soul psychology. Your hands is your personality psychology. So it's almost like two systems that every person is born with. So it really gives you a rounder, more whole picture of what is going on, in your psyche and your heart and soul.
Got you. All right. So I think this would be the perfect time to give the viewers an example of what this is like, and
Sure.
I'm going to be the sacrificial lamb.
Oh,
Because I do it all the time on the
okay.
microphone,
He says I'm used to it.
and I don't mind. So I'm going to put my hand up and tell
Okay.
me if you want me to move it in certain ways so we
Okay.
can see it clearly.
If you
Do you
just
want
put
to
it,
see just the
okay,
palm
yeah,
right now?
just the palm right now.
Okay.
Okay. Basically what I see is I'm going to look at your heart line, and your heart line is that big horizontal, or the horizontal line that starts under your pinky finger and kind of goes across your hand.
Mhm.
And you have a little bit of what we call as a curvy earth heart line. So the fact that you're on here talking about these
So
things, yeah, yeah, and
pinky finger. Okay.
pinky finger can you see me with my hand up here?
Yeah, yeah.
Starts, and it goes like that. Your heart line it doesn't go all the way out to here, and it doesn't go all the way up in here. It ends about here, but it's a little bit curvy. It's not super straight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So first of all, what that means is you have a tendency, once you give, you can be very loyal. Loyalty, once you give it, once you make a commitment, you can be very loyal once you make the commitment. The second thing is that when you get really vulnerable, and because probably doing these shows, you've probably made some progress on this, but to be really vulnerable, you probably need to feel safe. And it doesn't mean that you don't feel things. You absolutely feel things, but you're going to keep it just a little bit on the low down. Now, this isn't something that you don't care about. I'm talking about those really vulnerable feelings in here. A little bit on the low down, unless you feel safe. Now, obviously, doing a show like this, you've made some progress, because a lot of people with that heart line, they just don't want to be vulnerable. And part of what they have to learn how to do is when to be appropriately, to be open and to be vulnerable. It's a little bit easier for you because your line is curved. If it was super straight, it would be much, much more challenging for you to learn how to do that. You can learn how to do that, but it just would be more challenging for you to learn how to do that.
Gotcha. Do you want to see more?
Let's see. Okay, you have your headline, which is your thinking style, by the way. Right there is that it's not super short, but I have a feeling that you kind of can make, most of the time you can make decisions fairly quickly. You don't have to think and overthink on it. You get a gut feeling, yes, no. And I'm not saying you never sit back and say, okay, this decision I need to think more on, but just your general style is to be a little bit quicker, where somebody with a really long headline, they like to think it. Your hand shape is also more earthy. That you may love spiritual things and love like that, but you want to take it out from the ether and you want to say, okay, let's make it practical. Your work is very important to you. And it's that type of thing.
Is there a difference between the left and the right hand?
Your left hand is usually how you are more in your intimate relations, with yourself and those very, very close to you. Your right hand is more how you are out in the bigger world. And how we know that is.
Here you go.
Okay.
That's my right hand.
Yeah, it's fairly similar. It's fairly similar. You've got good energy. You've got nice thumbs, stuff like that. You're probably a fairly energetic person. Yeah. Yeah, your right and left hand some people's right and left hands are very different. Like my right and left hands are very, very different. Some people, yours are fairly similar. So that means you act pretty much the same. I'm not saying it's never different, but pretty much the same, whether you're, out in the world or you're with, with your intimate group of people.
Mm-hmm.
But you're energetic.
Would you relate that to being authentic? Like, I'm not pretending. I used to pretend a long time ago, but I don't anymore.
Yes, it could be. Yeah, that could be authentic and just being very comfortable with yourself.
What about the prints? How do you look at the prints?
Well, of course, if my clients are, if I see them live, I print them themselves, and then I look at the print, or I look at their live hands. If somebody is far away, what I do is I send them a printing kit, and they print their fingers. And
I can't see anything.
No, I can't.
Nothing.
I can't do that. But but then I send them a printing kit, and so they print their fingerprints and hands for me, and then they send it back, and then we just go from there. We either have a Skype session or a phone session, and then we have our reading from there.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Yes.
And so once you do this reading, then what is it that they're going to get that they can use to make different choices in their lives?
Well, one of the biggest things that was so confusing to me, and I'm going to tell you for probably the majority of my clients, You know that problem that keeps happening that you just don't understand why, and that is so painful and hurtful? Well, that's a part of your fingerprint pattern called your life lesson. And just the understanding of that life lesson and what those patterns are can be very, very helpful, and learning to reframe it from I'm defective, because a lot of the clients I get is what's wrong with me? I'm defective. Why is this so hard? And reframing that from being defective as a skill set you need to learn. That was very important for me, and is very important for my clients. I'm going to give you an example of some. There are 14 possible life lessons as well as life purposes, and you can have more than one finger with a purpose or lesson, and they can form what we call archetypal combinations. But I'm going to give you an example of a very common one. And it's a low-ranking print, or a least complex print, on your left middle finger. And that finger, when you have that as part of your lesson, what it is learning how to really claim your value, your nobility, and to live in integrity with your deepest values. This is deep stuff. This is deep stuff. And it can show itself in several ways. For some people, they're constantly putting themselves down. But the other way it can show itself is, you do something horrible and you don't even think you should apologize and say, wow, I'm sorry. Either you're guilty for something that you didn't do, you feel guilty about everything, or you don't feel guilty about maybe something you ought to, and say, wow, I'm sorry, and make restitution. So there's what we call the Goldilocks principle. Either it can be too much or too little, and you have to learn what to be just right. So when you have this left middle finger as your lesson, it's about, first of all, what are my values? What does living with integrity with my values mean? What if I do cross my boundaries or cross my values, how do I make appropriate restitution? Say I'm sorry, apologize. And then how do I expect other people to treat me as a person of value and integrity? So it's deep, it's deep and very multi-layered.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, I just went through with something myself that I was actually caught by surprise, and I still don't know why this happened, but I'm not saying anything like what you just mentioned, which is there must be something wrong with me, because I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. But 8 months ago, I was called to take this work because, as you can imagine, doing over 15,000 shows of this nature, we've got into basically pretty much every subject matter you can get into regarding personal development and regarding a lot of sciences, including healthcare, relationships, and those sorts of things. And it's I see myself almost running a living laboratory. A living laboratory for consciousness and for being awake, and we teach people how to be in the present moment, which is what I'm doing with you. I'm being with you right now, and I don't have the chatter in my head thinking about all kinds of things, which I used to have. So I can distinguish the difference between who I used to be and who I am today. So I can really listen to you and even hear things that you may not be saying by words. So we also want to teach people that living in the moment is really all there is.
Exactly.
All we have is this moment and the next moment, and it's very precious. And we also teach them that time is just something that we created for convenience. Time doesn't really exist, because I'm finding that a lot of people use time as an excuse why they can't do something. They don't have time for it. And then I now go, what do you mean you don't have time for it? Time time has nothing to do with anything.
Mhm.
If it's something that you want, haven't you found that in your own life to be true? That if it's something you want, you're going to find the time for it. Isn't that true?
Yes, that's called prioritizing. And no, it is. It's prioritizing. And it's understanding who you are, and not allowing yourself to get distracted by all the stuff and saying,
Hmm.
this is important to me, and this is where I'm going to put my focus.
So let me get back to, I don't know how I got on this track, but I got to this track, whatever.
It's all good.
What I really wanted to share is 8 months ago I was called to take this work, all this stuff that I've learned,
Uh-huh.
into corporate America and see if I can make a difference.
Ah.
In regards to bringing consciousness to the corporate
Mm-hmm.
world, and I picked one of my, or maybe it picked me, one of my previous areas of expertise. I used to be in finance for about
Ah.
7, 8 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I am well aware that the financial industry is still very broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of got that Americans made money their god. And if you talk about how does this look like in the finance industry, it's not a pretty picture.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably picked one of the most challenging projects I could have picked, and I went into a company and introduced them to consciousness and how consciousness can make a difference in
Mm-hmm.
their own lives and
Mm-hmm.
in the lives of the corporation. Because corporations, I think we've been taught that corporations are their own entity and they are a living thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding that not to be true. What I'm
Mm-hmm.
finding is that corporations are the people that are in it, and
Yes.
their energy
Mm-hmm.
and how they operate creates this new entity called the corporation. But
Mm-hmm.
it's part of the people. The
Absolutely.
corporation is not an entity all by itself. Without the people, there is no corporation.
Absolutely.
There's just a name.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to work with them, and they were very open to this and very
Mm-hmm.
interested, and they wanted to do it. But what I found, I'm going to fast forward 8 months, is that they were basically loved all the things that I brought in, and they all went like, yeah, we want that, we
Mm-hmm.
want that. But what I learned after 8 months, what they really wanted is just more money, and
Ah.
they figured that this way, like if this was a new way of getting to the money, they were
Ah.
interested.
Mm-hmm. But if it wasn't a new way of getting to the money, they weren't so interested.
They weren't so interested. So they were basically, the bottom line. They were unwilling to do the work that you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about. They were unwilling to do the work between the partners, the work between the employees,
Mm-hmm.
the work that I feel that's very important. That you've got to recognize that there is elephant in the room,
Uh-huh.
and I can see it, I can feel it. Can't you? And let's talk about it, and let's see
Mm-hmm.
what's this elephant doing in the room.
Well, it's very.
and let's and let's not talk about anything else until we resolve that. So I wanted them to go do some weekend projects where
Mm-hmm.
we could actually get together and get connected to each other, and figure out what what they really wanted to create with this company.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was after is, how can we provide value? How can we serve people? And how can we not make money the number one reason why we get up in the morning and do this? And
Mm-hmm.
can we focus in on that and figure this out for ourselves? And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, after 8 months, what I learned, is that they weren't really interested in that. They
Mm-hmm.
were interested in me bringing in more people, and they were interested in my talents in terms of bringing in the right people that would fit
Mm-hmm.
this description that I've created, which we didn't
Mm-hmm.
create together. I just created this description. I said, well, isn't it time to transform the finance industry? And they said, yes, it is. And I said, well, what does that
Mm-hmm.
look like? So I said, well, the way it looks like to me, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
open for your feedback. Let's
Sure.
let's create it together.
Uh-huh.
What it looks like to me is that we've got to create an atmosphere where um, we are providing value to the realtors, to the
Mm-hmm.
clients,
Mm-hmm.
to each other, to the employees. And what does
Mm-hmm.
that look like? And what does it feel like? Like, how do we know that we're really doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we put that as the primary purpose of us being here? And
Mm-hmm.
let's not worry about the money because the money is going to come.
Right.
But guess what? They couldn't put the money aside. The money kept surfacing up
Ah.
to the top
Mm-hmm.
constantly, and I couldn't make it go away.
Mm-hmm.
So
It
the whole
sounds like
thing
you
basically fell
just,
apart.
it sounds like you wanted to make a win-win. That was a
Yes,
win for
yes,
everybody. And that
yes,
they could not get through that a win-win will not only feed their paychecks, it will also feed their soul. I mean,
right.
if you know a good mechanic, will you not go to that mechanic? I've known a few really good car mechanics, and if you know an honest car mechanic, they have business out the wazoo.
Mhm.
Because why? Because people trust them,
Yeah,
and that's really
yeah.
sad that they could
So
not make that connection.
yeah, they weren't interested. You know what? They had no time for it.
Ah.
So so at the end of 8 months, I'm sitting here and I'm going like, oh my God, what a challenging project. I was basically faced with exactly what I wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
and what I wanted to transform,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't really make a difference. And that's a little bit hard for me right now.
You know what? I can understand that. And I'm going to be honest, especially I'm going to go back to your handshake,
Mhm.
practical, um, in the world, earthy, that, you've gotten this extra vision of what it could be, and they didn't want it. And that probably would really be, that would be hard. And especially they asked you, it's not like you went and like banged on their door
Yeah.
and said, I'm going
Well,
to make you do it.
well, they were, yeah, I mean, they were basically pretending with me, and I didn't pick
Mm-hmm.
it up until late in the game, that they
Mm-hmm.
were really pretending with me that they wanted it, but
Mm-hmm.
it was quite obvious because I watch people in terms of not just what they say, but what they do. And I
Mm-hmm.
was watching their actions, and it was obvious to me, based on their actions, that they weren't really up to this. Really, really were not. They were too comfortable with their old patterns, and
Mm-hmm.
change is not something that they were interested in.
Yeah. Was it like a really big company or a small company or
Well, I started with them. There was only, let me think, one, two, five of us,
only
and then
five?
when I left, we basically more than doubled the size of the company.
Wow. Wow. And they still weren't interested. That's amazing. That's
No,
sad.
because
That's sad.
because one of the partners actually the kind of individual he
Hmm.
is that it's my way or the highway,
Ah,
and I was wondering if he would be willing to look at this, but it was painful watching it because
yeah.
he got reactivated so many times
Hmm.
in the company, and I saw him abuse employees, and
Mm,
it was just like, oh my God, I mean, I don't need to be around this.
right. I
So
would love,
I walked away.
you walked away. I would have loved to see all their fingerprint patterns, and also their hands, because believe it or not, you can use, like I can look at fingerprint patterns, but like if a couple it wants to get in relationship or something, I can look at both their fingerprint patterns in their hands and kind of give insights into how, what might work well and what might be an issue. And also, when sometimes people are going in business together, you can look at hands to see, what is one person's strengths, who's the visionary, who's the get it done person,
Mhm.
things like that. But it sounded like, and this is just very typical issues of power. a lot of issues of power and issues around money. Um, Power is actually, there's a leadership-like purpose that has a lot to do with power and how to use. It's one of the more common ones. This is.
I wanted them to collaborate, Susan.
Mhm.
I wanted to have that whole power thing that they had going on, to change, to just transform it, because it doesn't work.
Well, now that's the old way of using power that doesn't work. What's a way of
Hmm.
integrity? And you can be a powerful person and still work in collaboration.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
the old patriarchal way, the way that the shadow side of power, the way that is getting us into trouble. But what's a new way? What's the way of integrity, of openness, of authenticity, of using? I mean, you've had to
Well,
use power to create your
for
business,
me, the new way is to share how I feel
to share.
about any situation that's coming up. I'm open,
Mhm.
and you can absolutely bet that I'm going to tell you my truth, and this is how I feel, and we can make decisions and choices together. Uh, and I think it would work beautifully, if everybody would cooperate. But I mean, look at
But
the world, you
yeah, but
know?
the shadow side of power is when you don't want to cooperate. And the shadow side of power is based on fear. So
Hmm.
you've worked through a lot of your stuff. So you can get to the other side of power, a more positive way of using your power and your influence. With integrity and authenticity and openness. But the shadow side of that is what you just described. And what's so interesting is the leadership life purpose, which is all about learning how to use power with integrity, is one of the most common life purposes out there. And they don't think it's an accident, because that is the lesson that we need to learn. Another very common life purpose is manifestation. What do we want to manifest? Are we manifesting what we think we should, or what authentically our heart and soul tells us that we should? So it's really interesting. What are the more common life purposes versus what are the least, the lesser ones? And so I'm not surprised that, especially in that particular group of people you were with, that there were a lot of issues about power, influence, who's the top dog and
Hmm.
stuff like
Yeah,
that.
this was tough. This
I
was
bet
tough.
it
I didn't e-
was.
Knowing what I know today, 8 months later, I didn't know what I was taking on. I was just
Yeah.
so blindsided by all this stuff that I've been doing in the last 12 years. I basically lived in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was just wonderful because I had no reference point,
Mm-hmm.
how the world is working. Matter of fact, I didn't care really
Mm-hmm.
how the world was working because I didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't working for me. So I
Mm-hmm.
created my own world. But
Mm-hmm.
then I kind of got bored with my own world, and I said,
Mm-hmm.
well, so now that I have all these skills and all this stuff that I learned, how about taking this to the world and see if I can make a difference? And I didn't really know how difficult and challenging it would be.
So the questions would be, what did you learn? And because the truth is, we can't live if we're going to change the world and make the world a better place, those of us,
Well, but
we can't live
I
in a
don't want to
bubble.
change. I don't want to change the world. I just
Oh,
want to
you
change.
don't.
No, no. I
When
mean,
you change
yes and no.
yourself, when you change
Yes
yourself,
and
you
no.
change
I
the
just want
world.
to change me. I want to
Mhm.
become a better person every day, and that's what I've been working on for the last 12 years.
But that's changing the world. When you
Yeah.
begin to heal, you do your part. And I think that we have influence that we may not even understand the influence that we have. So, changing the world starts with changing ourselves.
Yes. And that I'm interested in. I
You
did
know.
not go into this company to change them,
Mhm.
to have them be the way I think they should be.
Mhm.
I went into this company to have them recreate and transform this company to what we all wanted it to be.
Mhm. Mhm.
That was my purpose. It wasn't I didn't have an agenda, uh,
Mhm.
you know, under underneath, that I went in there with these ideas, and I didn't have any agenda underneath there that I
Mhm.
wanted my way. No, it doesn't have to
Mhm.
be my way. It has to be our way, whatever
Right.
we decide.
Right. But that's almost like being a catalyst. Almost sound like you want to be a catalyst. Maybe, or just
Yeah.
also a little bit of a visionary to say this could be different. You know, this is how it is now.
Mm,
It could be different. And then together, let's put our minds together, how we can, you know, all of our visions together and see how we can implement it.
mm.
That's very visionary. That's very visionary.
Yeah. Well, maybe. I mean, I learned a lot.
Mhm.
I learned tons.
I bet you did. I
so
bet you
so
did.
it I wouldn't say that it was a waste of my energy or time because it wasn't. I learned a lot of
Mhm.
things. Maybe the way this works is I just like when you get thrown off the horse, you get right back on and do it again.
Mhm. That's right. And the important thing, one of the important things, and this is that we learned,
But
you know,
next time I'm gonna get their handprints. I'm gonna call you
I
and get the
want you to.
kids.
I want you to. I want you to. One of the things that we have that I learned that I loved about this was that you can embody your purpose even if your life isn't perfect. In other words, you did this, you tried this, you know, it didn't work the way you did, but you can
Yeah,
still
but
find meaning and
Susan, I'm
purpose in
not
it.
I'm not judging it. I'm not judging it
Oh,
that
you,
way. It was perfect. It was perfect to me just the way it turned out. Because
uh-huh,
if it was supposed to be any other way, it would have been. It wasn't. It is the way it
right,
was,
right.
and it's
But
perfect just the way it is.
some people, that especially some of my clients, they think, oh, I'm only living on purpose when everything is going perfectly. Otherwise, it means I'm not living on purpose,
Oh,
or I cannot
it,
garner meaning or learn something unless it like looks picture perfect. And
who am I?
so,
Who am I to know? Who am I to know, Susan, what perfect is?
well, some people, what they do, they get very attached to form. See, you've done a lot of work along the way, Steve. You've done a lot of work along the way. But some people, you know, this is what perfect looks like. And so
Mhm.
they get very attached. It has to look like that. And so they don't allow themselves, you know, they feel like a failure and they don't even allow themselves to garner a sense of meaning or the fact that I showed up authentically and I did the best I could. And that's what happened, you know? And so they kind of beat themselves up unless it takes this particular form. And it's really important not to do that, that everything every experience in our life, we can unlock our purpose and live it authentically. And I think that I love that principle. And you just gave a perfect example of it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is what we do on these shows.
Mhm.
We don't just talk about stuff from books. We we bring in exact life experiences, because
Yeah.
that's what people
Make it
can relate to.
real and live it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell our viewers just for a couple of minutes
Sure.
what are some of the things that you're doing right now, how they can get in touch with you, how can they
Okay.
sign up for anything that you're offering these days? Because I think what you do is absolutely an awesome tool because it gets people to start and not start on a white screen.
Right. It gives you, I always say, it's like, you know how sometimes we say, goodness, I wish I had been born with an instruction manual?
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm not going to say your hands say everything, but it tells you a lot. It gives you a great place to start, kind of like an instruction manual to explain you to you. So how you can
Well,
get
we have come with instruction manuals, obviously, on our hands.
exactly,
We
exactly.
just didn't know it.
We just didn't know it. We didn't know how to read it. So how people can get in touch with me is, of course, they can go to my website, which is thelifeweaver.com. That's THELIFEWEAVER.com. And I have a contact page on my website, and so you can email me that way. Through my website. And on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. And also, I have a great free giveaway that explains all about heart, all the 4 types of heart, actually 5 types of heart lines. And so it gives you a lot of very practical information. You can look at your hands and your friend's hands and, start, start understanding yourself a little bit better that way. I will say Heartlines has a lot of markings on them. Obviously, that's your emotional system. So there's a lot of stuff on there, but just knowing, the length and stuff like that is very, very helpful. If you want to contact me to schedule a hand analysis session, you can just contact me through that contact page on my website. And just tell me. I do have several levels because some people are just kind of curious and they just, want a one session reading, and I offer that for people. I also offer 2 or 3 session hand analysis for people who really want to go deeper into their story. Some people even want to go further. And so, we can, if that's what someone wants to do, we can talk about that, how that works for them.
Great.
So and again, I really want to emphasize, you don't have to be in person. I can read anywhere in the world. As long as I have your fingerprints and handprints, we can have a great session.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
Yes.
All right. So before we close out the show, because believe it or not, the conscious hour is almost over.
I see. Oh my God, it went by so fast.
Wow.
Oh, I love it.
That's what everybody says. Let's talk a little bit about synchronicities. That's one of my favorite.
Oh, I love it.
One of my favorite words. What are they, and what do they mean?
Oh, synchronicity, I think, is when I think it's when something happens and you're really listening to your spirit somehow, and you may not even be conscious of it, and then things just like work. 1, 2, 3. It works. Oh my goodness. There can be so many examples. It's just when you're tied into something and you're ready for something that it just shows up.
Everything like an orchestra. Everything just
like an orchestra. It just shows up and it works.
A beautiful music. It sounds like beautiful music.
And it sounds like beautiful music. Yes. I've had many synchronistic things that happen in my life, things that, even meeting my husband. My husband's not from this country. He is from, if you looked at where I was born in Los Angeles and where he was born, we're almost as far apart in the world.
Where is he from?
He's from Iran. My husband's from Iran. Uh-huh. And I was born in Los Angeles. We're like across the world. And you know where we met? We met in Nashville, Tennessee. So, go figure. Seriously. We met in Nashville, Tennessee. And also just synchronicity is about feelings that you get. Like, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I knew from a young child that my fate was not in Southern California. And I know some people love it, and I have family there, and I love them all. But I knew it wasn't my place. I just knew it. I knew it. And so in my early 20s, I traveled and I left, and I actually really love Middle Tennessee. But just little things like that, how I found hand analysis, I don't even remember.
Hey, I lived in Tennessee, and I lived in LA too.
Okay.
Are you in Tennessee now?
I live in Tennessee now, about close to.
Oh, really? I used to live in Jackson.
Okay, more out towards Memphis. I know exactly
Memphis. It's in the smack middle, actually.
Yeah, it's about 70. Yeah, it's about middle, because my husband, we lived in Memphis for a while too. So, but I like Middle Tennessee better. I like Middle Tennessee a lot. But yeah, I've lived in Chicago, Michigan. I've actually lived out of the country for 5 years. So I've traveled around a bit. I like it.
Well, very
much. Yes.
All right. Well, Susan, you've been absolutely fantastic. I love what you do, and I bet that you make a difference in people's lives every day. And thank you for being on the network. This is something very unique. We haven't had somebody with your talents. There might not be that many people that do this stuff. So because we've been around for a while, and this is not something that we get bombarded by. We get bombarded by NLP practitioners and life coaches, and this goes on. But very unique. It was very awesome. It was also entertaining. I loved it, and thank you for the examples. And I hope people will take advantage of what you do and how they can get started on figuring out what their life purpose is, because a lot of people have no clue.
No idea.
because I didn't know. Because I didn't know either.
Yeah.
So, if anything that for everybody else out there, if anything that Susan said has touched, moved, and inspired you, continue to come back onto the network at consciousrevolutionmedia.com. Continue to watch our shows on YouTube. The more you watch these shows and other shows, the more they will show up in the top 10 every month. When they make it to the top 10, because of your viewership, they have an opportunity to go to public television, which is over 100 million eyeballs.
Awesome.
So thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you. It was wonderful. You were great. I loved it.
Thank you. Yeah, this is what an unscripted show looks like and feels like. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good evening, everybody.
You too.